Komið í sæl og verið velkomin á þessa innsetningu í dag. Þetta röð af innsetningum háskólakennara sem að fá framgang í prófessorstöður við Háskóla Íslands. Og tilgangurinn og tilefnið í sjálfu sér að gera og samfagna með þeim sem hljóta framgang og gefa okkur tækifæri til að rifja upp viðfangsefni okkar og skýra frá fyrirætlunum okkar en einnig að kannski svona lítið við farin veg og rifja upp og njóta sögunar. Ég var aðeins hugsi þegar ég var að lesa feril Guðrúnar Larsen, datt mér í hug þessi hugtök ættuð úr líffræðinni frá kannski Dawkins memes, svona hugmyndir sem að erfast og smitast og lifa sínu eigin lífi. Sumir segja bara svona líffræðilegur. Og mér datt í huga því að Guðrún tengir hér saman, brú í þessari löngu hefð okkar í jarðvísindum og í feltjarðfræði og þess vegna hlakka ég mikið til að sjá þegar hún fer að rifja upp sín samskipti af okkar góðum og forverum í þessari mikilvægu grein. Við höfum haft þetta á ensku, þetta tekið upp og þessu einnig ætlað til þess að kynna skólan út af við og minna á ágæti hans og fyrir okkur til að nota til þeirra kynninga fyrir kollega og fólk sem við viljum fá til starfa eða náms við skóla. En þess vegna höfum við þetta á ensku og hérni frá fer þetta allt fram á ensku. Guðrún Larsen was born on November 1st, 1945 in Akureyri, where she grew up and completed the Akureyri Gymnasium. In 1964, she began her studies in geology at the University of Iceland in the fall of 1970, planning to obtain a BSc degree and become a high school teacher in geology and natural sciences in Reykjavík, where she now had a family. In the summer of 1973, she asked one of her teachers at the university, Sigurður Steinþórsson, now emeritus, if he had some task for her for the summer. He suggested that she took on a small project he and Professor Sigurður Þórarinsson had been planning, and Guðrún was set on a totally different course for the rest of her professional life. The project involved looking at the grain characteristics of one of the largest tephra layers or volcanic ash layers from the Hekla volcano and became the subject of her bachelor thesis in 1975. It later was the subject of her first scientific paper published together with Sigurður Þórarinsson in 1978, and immediately she establishes her in that legendary group. The following winter, Guðrún was a teacher in Reykjavík, but returned to the university to work on a fourth project, the equivalent of an honors project, on the eruption history of the Katla volcano, which was completed in 1978. Her supervisor were again Sigurður Steinþórsson and Professor Sigurður Þórarinsson. In the meantime, she had acquired stipendium at the newly established Nordic Volcanological Institute to work on explosive basaltic eruptions. The basaltic eruptions were at that time less well known than explosive eruptions that produced silicic tephra layers, which had by then been extensively explored by Professor Sigurður and used to construct a dating method based on the tephra layers, tephrochronology, which is also a powerful research tool in volcanology. After finishing her stipendium at the Nordic Volcanological Institute, she was a research associate at the institute until 1990, supported by the research grant from the Icelandic Science Fund and the National Power Company, Landsvirkjun. At the Nordic Volcanological Institute, Guðrún worked mainly on the project centered on explosive basaltic eruptions and associated hazards, including 3 of the largest volcanic eruptions in Iceland since the settlement in the late 9th century. She also took part in the mapping of the volcanically active areas within the Þjórsá-Tungná basin that was supervised by the geologist Elsa Vilmundardóttir at the National Energy Authority, Orkustofnun. In 1990, Guðrún applied for the position of a research scientist at the Geoscience Division, Jarðfræðistofa, at the Institute of Science at the University of Iceland, and moved to the Institute of Earth Sciences when it was established in 2004. There she has continued her work on explosive volcanism and tephrochronology through various projects with Icelandic and foreign colleagues. These projects include the tephrochronology of Vatnajökull that added significantly to the eruption history of Grímsvötn and Bárðarbunga and demonstrated that the eruption frequency in that area is periodic. Other projects were as diverse as the correlation of tephra layers found overseas to their Icelandic counterparts and the application of tephrochronology to date and determine peak flow in prehistoric jökulhlaups from Katla. Guðrún has also participated in an international research project supported by the 5th and 6th framework of the European Commission, the program Holsmir and Pakliva Millennium, where Icelandic tephra layers have played an important role by determining the age of sediment sequences that provide information on climate and environmental changes of the past millennia. She has also taken part in the work on the recent eruptions of Hekla, Eyjafjallajökull and Grímsvötn, and is currently involved in the preparation of Catalogue of Icelandic Volcanoes, which is a collaborative effort between Icelandic Meteorological Office, the University of Iceland, and the Icelandic Civil Protection Agency. Guðrún was also a part-time lecturer in volcanology at the University of Iceland from 1988 to 2005 and has co-supervised a number of BS, MS and PhD students. Guðrún is an author and co-author of over 90 scientific papers, book chapters, about half of them in the ISI Journals series, in addition to scientific reports, geological maps, and numerous conferences, presentations, and public talks. The latest book chapters appeared in the recently published book on natural hazards, Náttúruvá á Íslandi, and include chapters on tephra and on the eruption history and hazards posed by the Hekla, Katla, Bárðarbunga, and Eyjafjallajökull volcanoes. Guðrún also carries these long traditions of field geology, and we look forward to listen to your lecture, and I invite you now, at the same time I congratulate on your promotion to a professor. Guðrún Lessin, gjör svo vel.
Hello everybody, and thank you for coming.
Guðrún, getur alltaf að sé kveikt á hátalara?
Nei, hvað kveiki ég? That's it. Okay, I will begin by my talk by some explanation of the terminology that also relates to the basis or the platform, if you like, upon which I have stood since I began working as a geologist, and then continue about the principal field in which I have been working with some examples of the projects I've taken part in. The Greek word tephra will occur time and again, a word brought into modern terminology by Professor Sigurður Þórðarson in his doctoral thesis in 1944. Aristotle the Greek used tephra in the sense of volcanic ash for an eruption in the 4th century BC, but Sigurður modified it as a collective term for all airborne pyroclasts formed in explosive eruptions regardless of size, shape or type, as you can see over there on the small photographs. Tephrochronology is the application of tephra layers as time-parallel marker horizons in environmental studies and as a tool in volcanology, in particular for the eruption histories of volcanoes or volcanic systems. The concept of tephrochronology was developed by Sigurður Þórðarson and introduced in his thesis in 1944. The Tefra chronological framework for the last 7,000 years in Iceland was constructed by him in the 1950s and 1960s. As already has been said, it was based on silicic tephra layers, mostly from the Hekla volcano, but also from other volcanoes such as Öræfajökull. For historical time, it also relied on extensive research or written descriptions which Sigurður had carried out, in particular for the eruption history of Hekla. The silicic tephra layer had already been extensively worked on, but the much more numerous basaltic explosive eruptions had received less attention. And although my first task was working on Hekla tephra layer, looking at the characteristics of that layer, most of my work concerns explosive basaltic eruptions and basaltic tephra. And this is seen here. Working with Professor Sigurður Þórarinsson was a great privilege for which I am grateful, and I would also like to express my thanks to Emeritus Professor Sigurður Steinþórsson for setting me on this course. Unfortunately, he cannot be here today. In Icelandic, I will use the phrase miklu veldur sá upphafinu veldur. Broadly, I can divide my work into 3 categories, using tephra as a tool in volcanology, and working on tephra chronology as a dating and correlation method, and also I have been looking at volcanic risk and hazards associated with explosive eruptions. Now, explosive volcanic eruptions, that's eruptions where the products are mostly or partly tephra, are a very substantial part of volcanism in Iceland. And I will only be talking about Holocene eruptions for the last, meaning the last 11,500 years, and mostly the last 8,000 to 9,000 years, which is as far back as I have ventured or got. In the last 11 centuries or so, which is our historical time, over 250 eruptions have been verified. We know that eruption products or have solid contemporary descriptions of the eruptions or have seen them by our own eyes. About 50% of these eruptions left only a tephra deposit, and another 10% left tephra and lava, which means that about 60% of the historical eruptions have left a tephra layer. And what we know about the time since the glaciers began to retreat is that the ratio of explosive eruptions appears to be similar through the ages. Thordarson and Höskuldsson have estimated that Holocene explosive eruptions are at least 1,900 in their 2008 paper in Jökull. Now, I'm telling you this because I'm trying to explain why I've hardly done anything but work on explosive eruptions and tephra deposits since 1976, and I feel that I've only scratched the surface. So what can tephra tell us? Each tephra layer preserves a record of the eruption that produced it, the type of activity, the course of events, the magnitude, the magma composition, and the conditions at depth. And in short, it can be seen as a data file on the eruption that produced it. And tephra layers are also archives on the eruption history of volcanic system where explosive volcanism is dominant. We can look both at individual explosive eruptions and the whole history, and I will begin by looking at giving examples of how work I've done on individual explosive eruptions and begin by my first task, the Hekla 4. It revealed to me how much information can be drawn from such an eruption. It was a small project, but it yielded some interesting results. For instance, we found that the opening phase produced extremely fine material, probably phreatoplinian, as a result of interaction with groundwater. We found that the magma composition had changed from 74% to 57% silica. Also that there was an extreme coring of the vents when the magma composition had fallen considerably. The reverse grading of the tephra indicated that the eruption column and the intensity was greatest when the silica content was about 64%, not at the beginning of the eruption. And we could find how the wind had changed during the eruption, and from that we deduced that the explosive eruption had lasted during the passing of one low pressure or some 24 hours, possibly slightly longer. The next eruption I worked on was, as you may have seen, the volume of the Hekla 4 tephra layer is about 10 cubic kilometers. The total volume is estimated to be about 10 cubic kilometers. The next paper was on the smallest, one of the smallest eruptions known, the tiny explosive eruption through a borehole in Námafjall. This is the vent, this is the source. It was part of the Krafla fires 1975 to 1984. The volume of the tephra deposit, this is what it looked like, was about 26 cubic meters, and I could follow it 150 meters from the source. Part of my work was on the volcanic history and the environmental changes on two volcanic fissure swarms or volcanic systems, the Veiðivötn and Katla volcanic systems. This included three of the largest basaltic explosive eruptions in historical time, the Eldgjás eruptions shown here, the Vatnaöldur and the Veiðivötn eruptions. All of them are explosive as a result of the magma interacting with external water or ice. All took place on long fissures, 65 to 70 kilometers long, but they were not continuous. They were discontinuous, and the tephra layers are among the four largest tephra layers in historical time. Eldgjá also produced large lava flows. Here is the tephra layer. Note that the thickness only goes out to half a centimeter, and here you see the tephra layer 15 kilometers from source being 2.5 meters thick, and the tephra layer did extensive damage in the vicinity of Mýrdalsjökull. The Veiðivötn eruption here was even larger. We estimate that the volume may be up to 10 cubic kilometers, and you can see that the 1 centimeter isopack extends into the sea of northeast Iceland. Yes, and the northernmost part here had been mapped by Sigurður Þórarinsson as tephra layer A coming from Kverkfjall area, but further mapping showed that this was the same layer as had come from the Veiðivötn fissure, which increased the volume considerably. The third large eruption I was working on came from the Vatnaöldur fissure. This eruption took place around at the same time or close to the North settlement of Iceland, and it is therefore an important isochrone or marker horizon in Tefra chronology. This layer is special because it is two-colored. It has a silicic, light-colored base and dark basaltic top. The reason being that the fissure here on the Veiðivatn fissure swarm invaded the unrelated Torfajökull system and remobilized silicic magma there, which erupted to the surface as the Hrafntinnuhraun lava flows, and also a silicic tephra layer. Now, if we look at the volcanic system, but first, why do this? The reason is that volcanic eruptions, as we know, can have profound impact on the environment and the society, even if they are small to medium-sized, just like the Eyjafjallajökull 2010 eruption, which had wide-ranging effects. So it's important to understand the long-term and short-term behavior of the volcanic systems, and it's the past history that tells us what has happened and also what can be expected in the future. And I'll use two examples. Well, a little bit about this here. We have about 30 volcanic systems active in Iceland during the Holocene, and those in red color here are the volcanic systems where explosive eruptions are dominant or substantial part of the activity, and you may note that part of them are covered by ice. But before I say more about that, a little bit about chemical composition. Many volcanic systems in Iceland have chemical characteristics or fingerprints that allow their products to be correlated to the source. And this was demonstrated by Sveinn Jakobsson in 1979 for the Eastern Volcanic Zone. This means that tephra layers at distant locations can be correlated to source in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases they can be correlated to source by their chemical characteristics. And this map here, I am using different colors to denote the different chemical composition. And it relates to the next slide. The two examples I'm going to use is firstly eruption frequency, and secondly magma evolution. First, the eruption frequency. These 6 graphs all show the eruption frequency, or rather the tephra layer frequency per 1,000 years. The first one shows all tephra layers with silica above 63%, the red one. The next 4 here are from Óladóttir et al. They show tephra layer frequency based on soil sections around Vatnajökull and east of Mýrdalsjökull for the volcanic system Grímsvötn, Bárðarbunga, Kverkfjöll and Katla. And the top one is by Guðmundsdóttir et al. And shows tephra layers of the last 9,000 years in marine core of North Iceland. Now, and first here I want to point out that the last 1,000 years, activity seems to be on the low side compared to the preceding 1,000 to 2,000 years, where we have peaks in the activity, with the exception that the core shows similar frequency in the last 3,000 years. And secondly, I want to point out that the activity has 2 peaks on all the graphs and a low in the mid-Holocene. And this goes for the Silicic tephra layers, Bárðarbunga, Grímsvötn, Katla, although Katla is a little bit shifted to this side here, well, Kverkfjöll, and tephra layers from a single core. And I'll come back to this apparent periodicity we see there. And note also that the data is not as good in the oldest part as in the other parts, so these peaks might indeed be higher. Here is an example of how tephra layers reveal the chemical composition of the Katla magma through time. The composition has been steady for some periods, like here, irregular or changed in irregular fashion, like here, and changed in regular fashion with time, as we can see for this period here, and this one as well. This is best shown by potassium here. Based on this, it has been suggested that the plumbing system below Katla evolves with time and that it's cyclic, that it evolves, for instance, from a simple magmatic system without a shallow magma chamber to a sill and dike complex and then to a shallow magma chamber. So a simple system, sill and dike complex, and then a shallow magma chambers. Eruption frequency is highest during the periods of sill and dike plumbing system, and at present we seem to be in a simple magma system. The composition, well, the irregular composition during some of the periods is best explained by being due to differential cooling in a sill and dike complex, and once established shallow magma chamber has developed, there is a regular increase in compatible element concentrations with time, as shown here. Well, we also can see changes in eruption frequency in other systems, such as in the Hekla system after the eruption of the large tephra layer Hekla 3. It seems that before Hekla 3 there were fewer and larger eruptions, and then more frequent but less voluminous explosive eruptions replaced that phase, and this took place at the same time as basaltic andesite became dominant component of the erupted tephra. And it's possible that from then on lava flows began to form. Here is an example of these tephra layers erupted shortly after Hekla 3. You can see a thin light-colored base and of andesite, and then a thick black top of basaltic andesite. This shows the change in number of tephra layers per 1,000 years, and here we can see the volume, the change in volume. Much greater volume during this time here. Then to the tephra chronology, dating and correlation. Tephra chronology has been used for many purposes. I will only mention a few. Tephra chronology of Icelandic glaciers, dating of lava flows and jökullaups, and correlation and dating of marine sediments, correlation of tephra layers overseas. I have done very little in that field. I will use tephra layers in Vatnajökull as an example because they also contribute to the eruption history in addition to dating the ice. This project was with Guðmundsson and Björnsson, and it used the tephra stratigraphy on the outlet glaciers. This is Brúarjökull, and the dark bands are tephra layers. The tephra layers were sampled by taking short cores, Óskar Knudsen and Magnus driving down the core taker. And this is of course in stark contrast to the 1972 project at Bárðarbunga, where a 400-meter core with tephra layers was drilled. Now, the oldest tephra layers in the glacier turned out to be from the 12th century. The Hekla 1104 tephra was not found. It added significantly to the volcanic history of Bárðarbunga and especially Grímsvötn. But what was probably most unexpected was that the activity in the volcanosphere of Vatnajökull, which incidentally is above the Iceland hotspot, turned out to be periodic with a period of 130 to 140 years. We did speculate what could have caused this periodicity in the activity, possibly a periodicity, possibly it could have been periodicity in the magma flux from the mantle, or it could be interaction of tectonic forces and mechanical properties of the lithospheric plates as they move apart. I'll come back probably to this. Now, tephra chronology was also used to date lava flows during the detailed geological mapping of the Þjórsá-Túna basin, supervised by Elsa Vilmundardóttir at the National Energy Authority. This was carried out in the 1980s. We used the tephra layers both to discriminate between and correlate the various lava flows, as well as to date them. Here, this cut from a map by Kaldal et al. Shows how we use the tephra layers, mostly from Hekla though, to date the tephra layers. And this is cut from a map by Vilmundardóttir et al. Showing the lava flows, corresponding lava flows. We have 6 lava flows here, the youngest being Tröllhraun, 150 years old, and the oldest being Gráhraun, over 8,000 years old. There was a project on risk and hazard assessment begun in 2003 about hazards from eruptions and jökullaups from Western Mýrdalsjökull and Eyjafjallajökull. It involved the mapping and dating of flood deposits and an attempt to use tephra chronology to determine peak flow or maximum discharge of the largest floods. Now, the mapping and dating was originally carried out by Kate Smith for her PhD in 2003, but it was expanded, and the chronology by us here, and the chronology is shown here. 11 verified jökullaups from Western Mýrdalsjökull, and how they fit into the regional tephra stratigraphy. And here is the area overrun by the largest flood 4,400 years ago. Tephra chronology has also provided age model in international projects that are centered on past environmental changes and use marine cores to obtain the data. And this has included marine cores on the Icelandic shelf. And this graph here shows this graph here is from Marine Corps 75. It shows the age model, tetrachronological age model. It's based on tephra layers dated either by historical sources here in the upper part or radiocarbon datings on terrestrial material. And here are only those tephra layers used for the models shown in this core, about 40-meter long core. There are over 100 tephra layers. Now, age models based on tephra layers have demonstrated that marine reservoir age has varied with time and deviates by several hundred years from the standard oceanic models. And these vertical bars here are show calibrated radiocarbon datings of mollusks, and you can see that they do not fit with the tetrachronological model and show the deviation in the reservoir age from the standard 400 years used in the oceanic model. And this is from a paper by Eriksson et al. Deals with this in more detail. And then finally, volcanic risk and hazard. I'll begin by an example from the Catalogue of the Icelandic Volcanoes, which is a collaborative effort, and use Katla as an example. As you can see here, this map here shows the extent of the 1 centimeter thickness in 15 historical Katla eruptions, and as you can see, they do not quite reach Reykjavik. This is the maximum range of the 1 centimeter isopack from Katla eruption. Eldgjá is not included here. And this one shows the probability, tetrafall probability towards west, and using the same 15 tephra layers, most of them went towards east, and this is in good agreement with a model by Trausti Jónsson in 1990 that used wind directions to predict where the tephra layers would go, and most of them would go to northerly and easterly directions. Now, having said, yes, and also we estimate the sizes, and as you see, most of the Katla eruptions are small. And having said that, I want to emphasize that there is a positive relationship between the magnitude of Katla eruptions and the length of the following interval in years. This means that even though there are almost 95 years since the last Katla eruption that broke through the ice, it says nothing about whether it will be large or small. Now, I was also trying to show how we used tetrachronology to determine the peak flow of some of the jökulhlaups. We traced the flood deposits into the soil with tephra layers on the slopes and found how high it had gone. So we could, by using then using the landscape, we could, or rather Gunnar Orri Gröndal and Sverrir Ellefsen could calculate the peak flow, which turned out to be about 250,000 cubic meters per second, which is very similar to the largest Katla jökulhlaups that go eastwards. Skip this one. Well, I've been a part of many team working on recent eruptions, mapping, sampling, observing, describing, drawing, writing as a part of team. Here are a few of them. A little bit about future tasks and questions before I stop. Concerning Icelandic volcanoes. My future as a full-time worker is only 3 years, so this is general. This is not what I'm going to do. But it's necessary for us, if we want better to predict the future behavior of volcanoes, we must thoroughly investigate their past behavior. And we need ground truth, which we obtain through fieldwork on past eruptions, because it's the only information left to us for most of the Holocene time. Historical time, where we can use descriptions, is only about 1,000 years, and the time when we have instrumental records is only some decades. Most of all, I think at the moment, talking about explosive eruptions, we need more information about magnitudes and the productivity. We have a fair knowledge on the eruption frequency. We need more about the magnitudes and productivity. Also, we need to test the physical models, the various physical models against field observations, being a field geologist. Of course, I stress that. And finally, I want to point out that TETRA, with its glassy component, is a unique tool to study and quantify magmatic processes on the various timescales. The volcanic glass is literally the magma that's coming up, frozen into glass. Well, and the future questions, or one question. What are we seeing here? Are we seeing actual periodicity in the frequency of eruptions? I've already shown these, and I already mentioned this one. What appears to be here is a period of some 500 years. These are all volcanic eruptions for historical time, and then I added from some sources data on explosive eruptions before landnam, and these are the last ones. Seems to be here some kind of a periodicity. What we see here is just a summary of the Grímsvötn, Bárðarbunga, and Kverkfjörð volcanic system. Here we see two peaks and a low in the middle, as we do here, this is a single section, as we do here in the Silícík Holocene layers, and as we do here in the lava flows mapped by Sveinn Jakobsson and published in 1979. I've changed this a little bit to fit it into the same scale as we are using here. And already then he proposed periodicity or longer time periodicity or peaks. They seem to be about 4,000 years apart. Why this is so, I'm going to leave that question open. Finally, my thanks to my supervisors long time ago, to all my present and past co-workers and students in the various tasks undertaken, and thank you all for your attention.
Now for questions. The final chance to call the shots before you come on. The unquestionable professor. The field, you said field geologist. Well, how has it changed and how is it going to change with the new equipment and the new, in this era, field geology, your field of expertise?
Well, That's a difficult question because the tools we have been using in field geology, in my case, is a spade and a good jeep. I need a good jeep and good assistance.
And the knife.
Sorry?
The knife. The knife.
And a knife, yes. But of course, with better equipment, we can do more. And we can do better sampling probably. And then our work on the samples, although that's not field geology, it will be greatly made much more easy by new equipment that is coming. Some of it has already arrived at this institute. But then we must be absolutely sure what each sample represents. Taking a representative sample is very important in field geology, and it's going to be more important as we get better equipment to work on that sample. I think that's what I'm going to say about this.
Questions? Yeah.
Could we have the picture of your first ash layer that you studied?
You mean Hekla 4?
Yeah, the Hekla 4. I mean, you could do an escape and then just.
Yeah, I'm not good at that. So
what I'm getting at is some of these silicic ash layers, these enormous, like this one here. Would Icelandic society function after an eruption like this?
well, I don't know. I was going to say here in the end that I hope I will never see a Katla eruption, and I hope I will never see an eruption like Veiðivötn, which is the same magnitude as this one. It's unlikely that we get this kind of Hekla eruption again, but we might get an eruption from Öræfajökull. Luckily, the eruptions from Snæfellsjökull seem to have been less voluminous. But Öræfajökull in 1362 probably produced 10 cubic kilometers of ash, just like this one. It went out to the sea that time. I don't know if the Icelandic society will function properly after an eruption like that. But we survived the Skaftáreldar episode. It will be probably just as difficult for those outside Iceland if we get an eruption like that.
I mean, air traffic in the North Atlantic.
Well, it will not be easy. It will have to move south. We don't know how long the fine ash will be hanging in the air. It could be a long time, months.
You said something about in the beginning of the talk about the fine grain size in the early phase of the eruption. I mean, is this anything comparable with the Eyjafjallajökull eruption? Or?
Yes, I think so. I think the opening phase of this eruption was affected by groundwater, or maybe lake water or small ice cap or something, and we got extremely fine-grained material and plenty of it. I think it's probably very similar to Eyjafjallajökull, same mechanism, possibly.
Good. Can you maybe comment on the uncertainty in like volume estimates? You say for this 10 cubic kilometers, how much of that falls on sea, and how do we know how much falls on sea versus land? I mean, is it 10% or 50%?
That's I think it's 6 cubic kilometers that fell on land in this case.
Yeah. And how accurate would that estimate be? Is that like plus or minus a cubic kilometer?
Yes, magnitude is correct.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have said that. The magnitudes, we can get the magnitudes correct, but details, not the details. Otto?
We, with the lifetime of a volcanic system like this is about a million years. And we have studied maybe 1,000 or even 10,000 years of those. So we have about 0.1 or up to 1% of the lifetime of the volcano. And is this in any way enough to be able to predict behavior of a volcano in the near future?
In the near future?
Yes?
Possibly yes, in the near future. But if you're thinking in say 10,000 or 100,000 of years.
Well, I'm not interested in that.
But for our 10 or 12,000 years here since the ice retreated, I think we can make useful, yes. Yeah.
What do you think about the conservation of the record, the soil record, such as on Álftaverja?
Álftaversafrétti.
Sort of picture of the Eggja.
Yes. Well, on top of this tephra layer, there is nothing. Well, when we are talking about the conservation of tephra layers, we have to think in terms of vegetation. Before the Norse settlement, we had a better vegetation cover, and we had woodland, no, scrubs, let's call it scrubs. So a tephra fall, once it had been got to the ground, when tephra had been deposited on the ground, it had good chance to survive. It was covered by the leaves and grasses of the next season and was preserved. Since then, conditions for the preservation of tephra layers have gotten worse. And just for instance, it has been difficult to map the tephra layer from 1918, the Hekla tephra layer from 1918, because it's so poorly preserved. But I have to add to this that the early years, before say 8,000 or 9,000 years, we have no soil or very little soil. So preservation of tephra layers for that period is mostly in the lakes, if it can go back beyond that period, or out onto the shelves. That's where we can get the record.
So if they would, for instance, make a dam and sink this part, it would be better preserved.
I don't think so, okay. I think this will be eroded once below a dam, because there is nothing on top of it to stabilize it. But if it had been that thick and already with some vegetation on top of it, it might have been preserved. Yes.
Should they plant a lupina or something?
I'm not going to answer this question.
Okay. Guðrún, thank you for your lecture. This was very interesting and a good overview of your. I just want to say, just like you said, you don't want to be around for the next big catastrophe will happen. But on behalf of all of us, I hope you be around when it happens, because we need you for some time.
Thank you.
With it, I congratulate you, and I er inn með blóm og bók og við bjóðum smá samsættis frammi þar sem við getum haldið áfram að